On the previous lesson, we looked at the new nations of the Middle East. Today, we will look at the importance of oil and Islam in this region, remembering the essential question for this chapter: what should governments do? First topic: why is oil important to Middle Eastern stability? First, a little background knowledge. Crude oil is the form that is converted into multiple products. There's a limited supply on the earth because oil is actually decayed fossils from dead organic life forms that have been compressed and heated over millions of years. Humans have found various pockets of oil, mostly in the Middle East. So oil has a high monetary value that keeps the Middle Eastern nations successful in the global economy.
Oil. Oil, otherwise known as petroleum or crude, is a thick black liquid composed primarily of hydrogen and carbon. The physical properties of oil, such as its thickness, vary greatly depending on the specific combination of hydrocarbon molecules. Oil also contains trace elements of sulfur, nitrogen, and oxygen. Today's oil deposits were formed millions of years ago when dead marine organisms sunk to the bottom of the ocean bed and were buried under deposits of sedimentary rock. After subjection to intense heat and pressure, these organisms underwent a transformation process by which they were converted to oil over millions of years. This is why you may have heard oil referred to as a fossil fuel. Oil is found in underground geological formations called reservoirs. The rocks found in a reservoir have various physical properties that allow them to hold hydrocarbon reserves. Through exploration activities such as seismic, surveying, rock core sampling, and other advanced technologies, geologists locate oil reserves. Oil is extracted from the reservoir most commonly by drilling a well. Once recovered, oil is transported by pipeline, ship, rail, or truck to a refinery where it undergoes a complex refining process that creates petroleum products like gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, asphalt, and many more. Currently, the world uses oil primarily to power its transportation system and to create commonly used synthetic products like plastics and petrochemicals. The production and use of oil presents social and environmental challenges. Producing oil causes land disturbance, sometimes in environmentally sensitive areas. Oil-powered transportation systems contribute to global greenhouse gas emission levels. And control of oil resources is a persistent factor in geopolitical tensions globally.
Some Middle Eastern nations joined together economically since the 1960s to produce oil, calling themselves OPEC. Their goal is to compete against Western oil companies' global dominance and set their production quotas and prices. In the 1970s, OPEC used its power to reduce the amount of oil available, to punish the U.S. for supporting Israel, whom they considered a regional threat.
Oil has proved to be a very powerful commodity, and consumers are very much at the mercy of those that control the global oil market. Oil producers are either part of the cartel OPEC or are outside and are often referred to as non-OPEC producers. OPEC, the Organisation of Petroleum Exporting Countries, was founded back in 1960 to stabilise the supply of oil, and to this day members broadly agree to supply oil to the international market at a specified rate of production. According to the IEA, that's the International Energy Agency, Saudi Arabia, one of the founding OPEC members, continues to dominate oil supply within OPEC, and in 2014 produced just over 10 million barrels of oil per day. 7 OPEC members, including Saudi, Iraq, Iran, UAE, Kuwait, Venezuela and Nigeria, all produce more than 1 million barrels of oil a day. OPEC used to supply 80% of world oil output, but its influence over the global oil supply has diminished and now accounts for just 40%, with non-OPEC members dominating, led by Russia, and then closely followed behind by the US, then China, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, Norway, Kazakhstan, and Colombia.
This chart shows the price of oil per barrel since the 1940s. It tends to go up when there are conflicts. These times are shown in orange. There have been more fluctuations in oil prices since the 1970s, mainly because the Middle East has been involved in more conflicts in the last several decades. Saudi Arabia has one of the world's largest oil reserves, meaning they are likely to find oil when they drill. Much of this oil has been exported to Western nations in exchange for U.S. military aid to keep Saudi Arabia stable. The country is led by a monarchy that directs the oil wealth and has used it to modernize their infrastructure and support human needs, like education. but that same government also suppresses oppositions to their decisions as a trade-off. After independence, many Middle Eastern nations were influenced by Western culture, including food, clothing, and entertainment. These kinds of things were shared among people when Western businesses moved into the region. Some nations, like United Arab Emirates, has some of the wealthiest people on earth and have drastically changed their living habits. Many of these same nations have also changed to secular governments, meaning they do not follow rigid religious doctrine in their legal system. But others have moved to even more religious forms of government, such as Iran. This is because of the Islamic revival movements that began in the 1970s. As Western culture became more common in the region, some Muslims felt this was undermining their original culture and have called to a return to Sharia law. This is creating legal rules based on original Quran text. This is called fundamentalism because it returns to the fundamental basics of Islam. Iran was the first nation to have a revolution to return to an old form of government rather than modernize. This variety in how Islam and Western culture traits are embraced are demonstrated in how women behave in the Middle East. There are great differences in clothing, political participation, and educational achievement among women. In nations where the Islamic revival is strong, women are more restricted. In more secular regions, women behave in more modern ways. Copy today's notes into your notebook, and I will check for points.